Captain Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the human warship Iron Phoenix watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His ship had been patrolling the empty space at the edge of human territory for 6 long months. The crew of 300 people were getting tired of seeing nothing but empty space and distant stars. Lieutenant Kim So-min sat at her sensor station, checking the readings for the 1,000th time that day. Her screen showed nothing unusual, just the normal background, radiation and the occasional piece of space debris floating by. She yawned and rubbed her eyes, wondering when they would finally get orders to return to Earth. Then everything changed. The space in front of them began to shimmer and twist like hot air rising from summer pavement. Suddenly, massive alien ships appeared out of nowhere. Their hulls were silver and gleaming like polished metal, reflecting the light of nearby stars. The ships were huge, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. The smallest alien ship was twice the size of the Iron Phoenix, and the largest one was so big it blocked out the stars behind it. Kim So-min stared at her sensors in shock. The readings were going crazy as the alien ships appeared. Her hands shook as she turned to report to the captain, Captain Lee. "We have contact. Alien ships just appeared in front of us. There are 12 ships total, and they are all much bigger than us." Captain Lee felt his stomach drop, but he kept his voice calm. "How big are we talking about, Lieutenant?" "The biggest one is 10 times our size, sir. Maybe more. The energy readings are off the charts. These ships have technology we have never seen before." The communication system suddenly came to life with sounds that were not human. A deep voice spoke in a language that sounded like rocks grinding together. The universal translator worked hard to turn the alien words into something humans could understand. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Vorthak Empire. Your small vessel has entered space claimed by our people. We will scan your ship to determine if you are a threat. If you resist, we will destroy you. If you cooperate, you may be allowed to leave." Captain Lee looked around his bridge at his crew. He could see fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were trained military personnel who had signed up to protect humanity. They would do their job no matter what happened. "This is Captain Lee Daeho of the Earth ship Iron Phoenix. We are on peaceful patrol in human space. We do not wish to fight, but we will defend ourselves if attacked." The alien admiral made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your weapons are primitive and your ship is small. You cannot defend against the might of the Vorthak Empire. We have conquered 47 star systems and destroyed countless species that tried to resist us. You will submit to our scanning, or you will be eliminated. Lieutenant Commander Park, Jin Woo." The chief engineer spoke quietly to the captain. "Sir, our shields are at maximum and all weapons are ready. The crew is at battle stations. We are as ready as we can be." "Captain." Lee nodded. He knew the Iron Phoenix was a good ship with a well-trained crew, but he also knew they were facing something far beyond their experience. The alien ships had technology that seemed like magic compared to human science. Their energy shields glowed with power, and their weapons looked like they could crack planets in half. "We will allow your scan, Admiral Kethvar. But know that Earth will learn of this encounter and they will respond accordingly." The alien admiral seemed pleased. "Your cooperation is noted, human. The scanning will begin immediately. Do not attempt to interfere or activate your weapon systems." Kim So-min watched her instruments as strange energy beams began sweeping over their ship. The alien scanners were incredibly powerful and detailed. They were examining every part of the Iron Phoenix from the bridge to the engine room. The scans went deeper than anything humans had ever created, looking at the molecular structure of their hull and the quantum patterns in their computers. The scanning process felt like being examined under a microscope. Kim So-min could feel the alien technology, probing their ship, learning everything about human science and technology. She wondered what the aliens would think when they discovered how humans built their warships. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Bae Soo-jin monitored the crew for any effects from the alien scanning. The energy beams seemed harmless to human biology, but she wanted to be sure everyone remained healthy. But she could see the stress on their faces. They all knew this encounter would change everything. The alien scan continued. For over an hour, the Vorthak were being very thorough, examining every system, every weapon, every piece of equipment on the human ship. Captain Lee wondered what they were learning and what they would do with that information. Finally, the scanning stopped and Admiral Kethvar spoke again. Your ship has been fully analyzed, human. Your technology is primitive as expected, but there are some unusual features that require further study. We will discuss what we have learned and decide your fate. The alien ships pulled back but remained in formation around the Iron Phoenix. Captain Lee knew they were trapped. The human ship could not outrun or outfight the alien fleet. All they could do was wait and hope that Earth would somehow learn of their situation. Dr. Bay approached the captain. Sir, I have been thinking about what just happened. The aliens scanned everything on our ship, including our databases and weapon systems. They now know everything about how we build our military vessels. Captain Lee nodded grimly. That is exactly what worries me, Doctor. If they understand our technology, they will know our strengths and weaknesses, but they might also learn something they were not expecting. What do you mean, sir? Captain Lee looked at the alien ships surrounding them. The Vorthak have conquered many species, and they probably expect all intelligent life to be similar to themselves. Peaceful, scientific, focused on art and culture. But humans are different. We have spent our entire history fighting wars and building weapons. I wonder what they will think when they truly understand what kind of species we are. The bridge fell silent as everyone considered the captain's words. The Iron Phoenix continued to drift in space surrounded by alien vessels that could destroy them in seconds. But Captain Lee had a feeling that the real surprise was yet to come. The aliens had scanned a human warship, and soon they would learn exactly what that meant. Admiral Kethvar sat in his command chair aboard the massive Vorthak flagship watching, as his science teams processed the data from the human ship. The scanning had gone exactly as expected. The human vessel was small and primitive, using crude, chemical rockets and simple electromagnetic weapons. Just another backward species that would either be conquered or ignored. The Vorthak had perfected the art of scanning alien technology over many centuries. Their scanning beams could analyze any material or energy pattern down to the subatomic level. Most species they encountered had similar technology patterns focusing on efficiency, beauty, and harmony. The Vorthak scanners were designed to quickly categorize and understand such civilized approaches to science. Science Officer Vexmar supervised the data analysis with casual interest. The preliminary results showed exactly what he had expected from such a young species. The humans had achieved interstellar flight only 200 years ago, making them practically infants compared to the ancient Vorthak Empire. Their ship used fusion reactors for power and simple projectile weapons for defense. Nothing that could threaten even the smallest Vorthak vessel. But as the detailed analysis continued, Vexmar began to notice some strange patterns in the human ship design. The vessel seemed to have far more backup systems than necessary. Every critical component had multiple redundancies, and those backup systems had their own backups. It was as if the humans expected everything to break down at the worst possible moment. The human computer systems were also unusual. Instead of having one central processing unit like most species, the humans had distributed their computing power across hundreds of smaller processors scattered throughout the ship. Even if most of the ship was destroyed, the computers would still function. This seemed like paranoid over-engineering to Vexmar Chief Engineer Park. Jin Woo continued his normal duties while the aliens scanned his ship. He had worked on human vessels for 15 years, and he knew exactly what the aliens were discovering. The Iron Phoenix was a typical human warship, which meant it was designed by people who understood that war was unpredictable, and equipment failure could mean Death Park had helped design some of the systems the aliens were now examining. The human approach to engineering was simple. If something could break, it would break at the worst possible time. Therefore, every system needed backups, and every backup needed alternatives. The ship could lose half its components and still fight effectively. The Vorthak scanning computers worked through terabytes of data about human technology. What they found defied their understanding of normal technological development. Most species develop science in a linear fashion, starting with basic tools and gradually advancing to more sophisticated devices. Humans seem to have developed everything at once, as if they were always preparing for war. Navigation Officer Oh Kyung-soo monitored the alien ships while pretending to work on routine calculations. The Vorthak vessels maintained perfect formation, showing the discipline of a species that had conquered much of the galaxy. But noticed something interesting in their positioning. The aliens were staying much further away from the Iron Phoenix than they had initially. The scanning data revealed that humans had an unusual relationship with their technology. Instead of seeing machines as tools or partners, humans seemed to view everything as a weapon, or a potential weapon. Their ship was not just armed with obvious weapons like missiles and energy cannons. Every system could be turned into something dangerous if necessary. The life support system could be used to create toxic gases. The navigation computers could calculate orbital bombardment patterns. The medical bay contained chemicals that could be turned into explosives. Even the food preparation area had equipment that could be weaponized. The entire ship was essentially a floating weapon that happened to also keep people alive. Vexmar called for additional processing power as the scanning computers began to struggle with the complexity of human military systems. The data was far more extensive than anything they had encountered before. Most species had simple databases about their technology and history. Humans apparently kept detailed records of every conflict they had ever fought. The historical data was particularly disturbing. Humans had been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history. They had fought wars on land, sea, airspace, and apparently anywhere else they could reach. Every technological advance had been immediately turned into a weapon. Every scientific discovery had military applications. The humans had developed an entire civilization based on the assumption that someone was always trying to kill them. Dr. Bei Sujin received a communication request from the Vorthak Medical Division. They wanted to understand human biology, particularly how humans could function so effectively in combat situations. She provided them with standard medical data, knowing it would paint a picture of a species evolved for violence. The medical scans revealed that humans were persistence predators who had evolved to chase prey across vast distances. Their nervous systems were optimized for quick reactions and split-second decisions under pressure. Their bodies could function effectively even when seriously injured, and their brains could process combat situations faster than most species could think. Communication Officer Han Min-ah detected increasing chatter between the alien ships. The universal translator revealed growing concern among the Vorthak crew members. They were discovering that the small human patrol ship was representative of an entire species that had turned warfare into a science. The Vorthak had expected to find a primitive species with simple technology. Instead, they were uncovering evidence of a civilization that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The humans were not just warriors. They were a species that had evolved warfare to levels that other civilizations could barely comprehend. As the scanning process neared completion, Vexmar realized they had made a serious error in judgment. The human ship was not primitive. It was specialized. Every system, every component, every design choice had been made with combat effectiveness in mind. The humans had not developed inferior technology. They had developed different technology, optimized for a completely different set of priorities. The Iron Phoenix drifted silently in space while alien computers processed the full implications of human military engineering. Admiral Kethvar was about to receive a report that would change everything the Vorthak Empire thought they knew about intelligent life in the galaxy. The Vorthak analysis computers worked through the night, processing the enormous amount of data collected from the human warship. What they discovered challenged everything the Vorthak Empire believed about how civilized species were supposed to develop. The human ship was not just a military vessel. It was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, built by a species that had turned killing into an art form. Commander Yoon Tai-ho stood at his weapons station monitoring the alien fleet, while running standard diagnostics on the ship weapons systems. He knew the aliens were learning about every weapon the Iron Phoenix carried, but he was not worried. The ship was armed according to standard human military doctrine, which meant it carried enough firepower to level a small city. The Iron Phoenix mounted conventional missiles that could track targets across thousands of kilometers, plasma cannons that could melt through heavy armor, electromagnetic railguns that could punch holes through solid rock, nuclear torpedoes that could crack asteroids in half, and antimatter warheads that could vaporize anything they hit. These were just the obvious weapons. The ship hull was covered with point defense systems that could track and destroy thousands of incoming projectiles simultaneously. Every surface that could mount a weapon did mount a weapon. The humans had turned their ship into a porcupine that could shoot in every direction at once. Even the communications array could be used as an electromagnetic pulse weapon if necessary. Vexmar stared at his analysis screens in growing disbelief. The human weapon systems were not primitive. They were incredibly sophisticated. The targeting computers could track hundreds of targets simultaneously while calculating firing solutions that took into account gravity fields, solar radiation, and the movement of nearby objects. The weapons could operate independently, even if the main computer system was destroyed. The Vorthak computers analyzed human military history and found records that shocked their operators. Humans had fought wars with stone clubs, bronze swords, iron spears, gunpowder weapons, chemical explosives, nuclear bombs, and now energy weapons. Every technological advance had immediately been turned into something that could kill more efficiently. The human tactical databases contained detailed plans for fighting in every conceivable environment: zero-gravity combat, underwater warfare, fighting in toxic atmospheres, battles in asteroid fields, combat near black holes. The humans had studied war so intensively that they had created strategies for situations most species had never even imagined. What truly alarmed the Vorthak was the discovery that the Iron Phoenix was considered a light patrol vessel by human standards. The scanning data contained references to much larger ships, dreadnoughts that could destroy entire fleets, battleships that carried planet-killing weapons, and something called a planet cracker that could literally break worlds apart. Dr. Bei Sujin provided additional medical data to the increasingly nervous alien medical team. The information painted a picture of a species that had evolved as apex predators. Humans could track prey for days without stopping. They could function effectively while seriously injured. Their reflexes had been honed by millions of years of either hunting or being hunted. The human brain was particularly disturbing to the Vorthak medical analysts. Human minds were optimized for pattern recognition, threat assessment, and rapid decision-making under extreme stress. They could process combat information faster than most species could think, and they could remain calm and effective even when facing certain death. The aliens discovered that human military training was unlike anything they had encountered. Most species that achieved spaceflight had moved beyond violence and conflict. Humans had instead perfected violence and taken it to the stars. Human soldiers were trained from childhood to be efficient killers who could operate independently in any environment. The tactical manuals recovered from the human ship contained strategies that would have been considered war crimes by most civilized species. Humans had detailed plans for orbital bombardment, civilian target elimination, and something called scorched earth tactics that involved destroying everything that might be useful to an enemy. But what shocked the Vorthak most was the realization that humans did not consider themselves particularly warlike. The ship databases contained casual references to their species as peaceful explorers who only fought when necessary. This suggested that what the Vorthak considered to be the most militaristic species they had ever encountered was actually restraining itself. The scanning data revealed that human space contained dozens of heavily fortified worlds protected by weapons platforms that could destroy entire invasion fleets. The humans had built their entire civilization around the assumption that someone somewhere was trying to kill them, and they had prepared accordingly. Chief Tactical Officer Shin Woo-jin noticed that the alien fleet formation was beginning to change. The perfect military arrangement was becoming looser and less coordinated. Several ships had begun charging their faster-than-light drives as if preparing for immediate departure. This was not the behavior of confident conquerors. The Vorthak leadership gathered in emergency session to discuss what they had learned. The scan of one small human patrol ship had revealed evidence of a species that represented a threat, unlike anything they had previously encountered. Humans were not just warriors. They were the ultimate warriors, evolved and trained for nothing but survival and victory. Admiral Kethvar faced a decision that would define the future of the Vorthak Empire. The humans were technologically inferior, but they were far more dangerous than their equipment should have allowed. They had turned warfare into a science, and they had spent their entire history perfecting the art of killing anything that threatened them. The discovery phase was complete, and the consequences were about to begin. The Vorthak had wanted to scan a primitive alien vessel. Instead, they had uncovered evidence of a species that could potentially threaten every advanced civilization in the galaxy. The question now was what to do with this terrifying knowledge. The Vorthak Leadership Council convened in the flagship command center, expecting to review routine scan data from another primitive species. Instead, they found themselves confronting information that challenged everything they believed about Galactic. Civilization Admiral Kethvar looked at the data summaries while his senior officers tried to process what they had discovered. The human ship was ugly by Vorthak standards, with angular surfaces and brutal efficiency in every design choice. But the aliens were beginning to understand that human aesthetic preferences were entirely focused on function over form. Every ugly angle served a purpose. Every brutal line was optimized for combat effectiveness or survival. Science Officer Vex Mar presented his findings to the stunned Leadership Council. The humans had developed their technology along completely different evolutionary paths than every other known species. While most civilizations progressed through phases of art philosophy and eventually peaceful exploration, humans had weaponized every advancement they made. The scan data showed that human history was an unbroken chain of warfare stretching back to their earliest records. They had fought with clubs, stones, spears, swords, guns, bombs, and now energy weapons. Each generation had found new and more efficient ways to kill their enemies, and they had never stopped improving these techniques. Most disturbing was the discovery that humans considered their current state to be peaceful. The ship databases contained references to this era as a time of unprecedented cooperation and restraint. This implied that human capacity for violence was even greater than what they had observed, suggesting capabilities that the Vorthak could not fully comprehend. Captain Lee received a priority transmission from Earth Command through quantum entanglement communicators. The message was brief but loaded with implications. Additional patrol groups are being dispatched to your location. Maintain peaceful contact if possible, but defend Earth space at all costs. Current fleet strength is 47 vessels with more en route. Lee realized that Earth Command was mobilizing a significant portion of the human fleet. The 47 ships mentioned were all vessels similar to or larger than the Iron Phoenix. Each one carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface. The human response to first contact was to send enough weapons to wage a war of extermination. Navigation. Officer Oh Kyung-soo plotted the positions of the incoming human fleet while monitoring Vorthak ship movements. The alien vessels were maintaining their distance, but several were now actively charging their hyperspace drives. The perfect military formation was dissolving into something that looked like barely controlled panic. The Vorthak computers continued analyzing human databases and found references to concepts that did not exist in any other species. Vocabulary: scorched earth tactics, mutually assured destruction, total war, unconditional surrender. The humans had developed an entire philosophy around the complete destruction of their enemies. The alien medical team discovered that human psychology was fundamentally different from other intelligent species. Most civilized beings avoided conflict and sought compromise when faced with threats. Humans instead prepared for conflict and actively sought to eliminate threats before they could become dangerous. This represented a completely alien mindset. Dr. Bae Soo-jin noticed increased communication activity between the Vorthak ships. The universal translator revealed growing alarm among the alien crews. They were discussing evacuation procedures, emergency protocols, and something called Code 7, which appeared to be their equivalent of a general retreat order. The Vorthak had built their empire on the principle of overwhelming technological superiority. They encountered primitive species, analyzed their capabilities, and then either destroyed them or absorbed them into the empire. But humans presented a completely different kind of problem. They were not more advanced than the Vorthak, but they were infinitely more dangerous. The scan data revealed that humans had contingency plans for fighting enemies in every conceivable situation. They had strategies for combat in zero gravity around gas giants near black holes and in deep space. They had weapons designed to function in corrosive atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and intense radiation. What terrified the Vorthak leadership was the realization that humans had developed these capabilities not through superior technology, but through superior thinking. They had taken relatively primitive equipment and used it in ways that more advanced species had never considered. The humans fought smarter, not just harder. The alien analysis teams discovered that human military doctrine was based on the assumption that any conflict would be a fight to the death with no possibility of surrender or compromise. This meant that attacking humanity would result in total war with a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for exactly that scenario. Chief Communication Officer Han Mina detected emergency signals being transmitted between Vorthak vessels. The alien fleet was beginning to spread out, breaking their perfect formation. Several ships had already begun preliminary hyperspace calculations, as if preparing for immediate departure. From the system, Admiral Kethvar faced an unprecedented decision. His empire had never encountered a species like humanity before. The humans were not more technologically advanced, but they represented a level of military sophistication that could potentially threaten every civilized species in the galaxy. The Vorthak had achieved their empire through careful analysis and overwhelming force. They studied their enemies, found their weaknesses, and then applied superior technology to achieve quick victories. But humans appeared to have no weaknesses, only layers of redundant strength and an absolute commitment to survival. The realization was complete, and the consequences were beginning. The Vorthak Empire had stumbled across a species that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The question now was whether they should try to destroy humanity before it could spread or retreat, and hope that humans would remain in their own space. The Iron Phoenix continued its patrol, out surrounded by alien ships whose crews were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. The scan was complete, but the real discovery was just beginning. The Vorthak fleet experienced its first system failures within hours of completing the deep scan of the human warship. Their sophisticated computers, which had successfully analyzed the technology of dozens of conquered species, began experiencing critical errors when processing human military data. The scanning systems had downloaded far more information than they were designed to handle. Science Officer Vexmar watched in growing alarm as his primary analysis computers began shutting down. Randomly, the human databases were incredibly complex, containing not just technical specifications, but detailed tactical manuals, strategic planning documents, and historical records of thousands of conflicts. The Vorthak systems had never encountered data. This militaristically focused communications officer Han Mina detected increasing distress calls between alien vessels. The universal translator revealed panic in the voices of Vorthak technicians as they tried to deal with cascading system failures. Their computers were not just overloaded, they were experiencing what could only be described as digital nervous breakdowns. The Vorthak artificial intelligence systems had been trained on the peaceful technologies of civilized species. They were optimized to process information about art, culture, science, and the gentle expansion of knowledge. Now they were trying to analyze weapon systems designed by a species that had been perfecting the art of war for millennia. Several alien ships reported complete failure of their tactical computers. The AI systems responsible for analyzing enemy capabilities had encountered human military doctrine and essentially suffered electronic panic attacks. The concept of total war fought, with absolute commitment to victory or death, was so alien to Vorthak thinking that their computers could not process it. Admiral Kethvar received reports from throughout his fleet that painted a picture of technological chaos. Ships that had operated flawlessly for centuries were now experiencing random malfunctions. The scanning of human technology had introduced concepts so foreign to Vorthak civilization that their own systems could not cope. The alien medical computers were particularly affected by the human biological data. Dr. Bei Su-jin had provided standard information about human physiology, but the implications were staggering to species that had evolved beyond physical conflict. Humans were biological weapon systems optimized for survival under the most extreme conditions. Navigation Officer Oh Kyung-soo observed the Vorthak fleet formation with professional interest. The aliens were losing cohesion as individual ships dealt with their system failures. The perfect military discipline that had allowed them to conquer 47 star systems was dissolving into chaos. The Vorthak discovered that human tactical databases contained strategies for fighting in situations they had never imagined humans had detailed plans. For combat during solar flares, battles in the coronas of stars, fighting while falling into black holes, and warfare in the spaces between galaxies. The scope of human military thinking was beyond Vorthak comprehension. Chief Engineer Park Jin-woo monitored the alien ship's technical difficulties with grim satisfaction. The Vorthak had wanted to understand human technology, and now they were learning that human engineering was fundamentally different from anything they had encountered. Every human system was designed to keep working even when everything else had failed. The alien fleet medical officers requested emergency consultation about something they called concept contamination. Their staff were experiencing psychological distress. After reviewing human combat manuals, the idea that an intelligent species could be so thoroughly militarized was causing actual mental health problems among the Vorthak crews. Several Vorthak vessels began emergency shutdown procedures as their computers became completely overwhelmed by human military data. The ships remained functional, but their analysis systems had essentially given up trying to process the implications of human civilization. This left the alien crews flying blind, unable to properly assess the threat they faced. The Vorthak leadership discovered that their standard protocols for dealing with primitive species were completely inadequate for humanity. Their procedures assumed that less advanced civilizations would also be less dangerous. But humans had proven that technological primitiveness did not mean military weakness. Chief Tactical Officer Shin Woo-jin noticed that more Vorthak ships were charging their hyperspace drives. The alien fleet was preparing for rapid departure, but several vessels were having difficulty with their navigation systems. The human data had contaminated even their star charts with references to potential combat zones and weapons placement strategies. The consequences were spreading beyond just technical failures. The Vorthak crews were beginning to understand the full implications of what they had discovered. Humanity was not just another species to be conquered or ignored. They were a potential existential threat to every peaceful civilization in the galaxy. Dr. Bai Soo-jin received increasingly frantic communications from Vorthak medical personnel. They were requesting information about human psychological warfare techniques, mental conditioning methods, and something called combat stress management. The aliens were trying to understand how humans could maintain their sanity while living in a perpetual state of military readiness. The alien empire had built its success on the principle that superior technology meant inevitable victory. But the scan of human military systems had revealed a species that could potentially defeat technologically superior enemies through pure tactical sophistication and absolute commitment to winning. Admiral Kethvar realized that his fleet was no longer capable of effective military action. The contamination of their computer systems with human military data had essentially disabled their ability to function as a conquering force. The Vorthak Empire was experiencing its first real defeat, and it had come from simply trying to understand their enemy. The Iron Phoenix continued its patrol surrounded by an alien fleet that was falling apart from the inside. The consequences of scanning human technology were spreading, like a virus through Vorthak systems. The aliens had wanted to analyze their enemies. Instead, they had accidentally absorbed concepts that their civilization was not equipped to handle. The Vorthak Empire faced a decision that would echo through galactic history. Admiral Kethvar sat in his command chair, staring at reports of system failures spreading throughout his fleet. The simple act of scanning one human patrol ship had effectively disabled the technological superiority that had built their empire. The aliens were learning that some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. Emergency meetings were held aboard every Vorthak vessel as crews struggled to deal with the contamination of their computer systems. The human military data was spreading through their networks like a virus, infecting every system that tried to process it. Their artificial intelligence programs were shutting down rather than attempt to analyze human warfare concepts. Science Officer Vex Mar submitted his final report to the Fleet Command. The analysis was devastating in its implications. Humanity represented a level of militarization that the Vorthak had never encountered. The humans had not just developed weapons, they had weaponized their entire civilization, including their thinking processes. The report concluded that humans were not a primitive species. They were a specialized species. Every aspect of human development had been focused on survival and warfare, with a level of sophistication that made them potentially more dangerous than any technologically advanced empire. The Vorthak computers had been unable to find any weakness in human military doctrine. Communication Officer Han Minna detected a priority transmission from the Vorthak flagship directed at the Iron Phoenix. The message was formal and diplomatic, but carried undertones that the universal translator identified as respectful fear. Admiral Kethvar was about to make an unprecedented announcement. Captain Lee received the alien transmission and listened with growing amazement as Admiral Kethvar delivered what amounted to a formal apology. The Vorthak Empire regretted the scanning incident and wished to establish a buffer zone around human space. They would not interfere with human expansion and would recommend that other species maintain a respectful distance. The message continued with technical language that barely concealed the aliens' panic. The Vorthak were implementing Protocol 7, which apparently meant immediate withdrawal from any area containing hostile forces. They were also establishing a permanent quarantine around human space to prevent accidental contact with other Vorthak vessels. Dr. Bae Soo-jin received a follow-up communication from the Vorthak Medical Division, requesting permission to establish psychological treatment centers near human space. Their crews were experiencing what they termed conceptual trauma from exposure to human military thinking. They needed specialized facilities to treat personnel who had been contaminated by human warfare concepts. The alien fleet began its withdrawal with a speed that bordered on panic. Several Vorthak ships activated their hyperspace drive so quickly that they suffered structural damage from the rapid acceleration. The perfect military formation that had intimidated countless species dissolved into a chaotic evacuation. Navigation Officer Oh Kyung-soo tracked the alien departure with professional satisfaction. The Vorthak ships were not just leaving, they were fleeing at maximum speed toward the edge of the galaxy. Several vessels transmitted emergency signals, indicating that they were experiencing navigation system failures due to contamination from human tactical databases. Chief Engineer Park Jin-woo monitored the alien fleet departure while running diagnostics on their own systems. The Iron Phoenix had suffered no damage from the encounter, but the Vorthak ships were clearly struggling with massive technical problems caused by their attempt to understand human technology. The retreat became a rout as more Vorthak vessels experienced critical system failures. Their computers continued to shut down rather than process human military data, leaving the ships flying on manual control. The aliens had effectively disabled themselves by trying to analyze an enemy they could not comprehend. Admiral Kethvar transmitted a final message before his flagship disappeared into hyperspace. The Vorthak Empire was implementing the Great Caution, a new policy that would establish permanent exclusion zones around any species that showed signs of human-level militarization. The galaxy would be warned about the dangers of contact with Earth. Chief Tactical Officer Shin Woo-jin watched the last alien ship vanish into hyperspace, leaving the Iron Phoenix alone in space. The encounter was over, but its implications would spread throughout the galaxy. The Vorthak would carry their story to every civilized species, warning them about the humans who had turned warfare into a science. The news of the Vorthak encounter spread quickly through the galactic community, becoming a cautionary tale about the importance of understanding a species before attempting to analyze their technology. The story was titled The Great Caution, and it established humanity's reputation as the most dangerous species in known space. Captain Lee submitted his report to Earth Command describing the encounter and its aftermath. The message was brief, but its implications were enormous. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy, not through diplomacy or trade, but through the simple demonstration of their military capabilities. Dr. Bae received requests for information from dozens of species who had heard about the Vorthak encounter. Everyone wanted to understand how humans had defeated a technologically superior empire without firing a single shot. The answer was simple. Humans had not defeated the Vorthak. They had terrified them. The Iron Phoenix resumed its patrol route, continuing the mission that had been interrupted by first contact. The crew understood that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer an unknown species exploring the galaxy. They were now recognized as the apex predators of civilized space. The Vorthak retreat became known throughout the galaxy as the day an empire fled in terror from a single, human patrol ship. The story spread to every species, creating a legend that would influence galactic politics for generations. The humans had not conquered through force. They had won through the simple act of being themselves. News of the encounter reached Earth and spread through human space with remarkable speed. The story became a source of pride for humanity and a warning to any potential enemies. The galaxy now knew that humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were the ultimate survivors who had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. The Iron Phoenix continued its patrol surrounded by empty space and distant stars, but the crew knew they were no longer alone in the universe. They had made contact with an alien empire, and that empire had chosen to flee, rather than face the possibility of war with humanity. The encounter was over, but the legend was just beginning.